Remember the exhilaration of what it was like to do any of these things for the first time. And hopefully continue to experience things in new ways, realizing that the problem in life is not that there's nothing to do. The problem in life is that there's so much to do. And there are so many things to do for the first time. And there's not enough time to do them because there's also a whole bunch of other things that you probably really want to do for the 1000th time as well. And so how do you balance those things out? Which is why, like, at least for myself, like how best to spend the time just inevitably becomes the question. And it strikes me as a thing that's just it's unspeakably sad in a life as short as ours. What is it that is important to her? I mean, you can see what she's afraid of losing. It's in the statement. One day she'll be old. Yeah. I wonder how many people, I don't know, I wonder how many men are worried about becoming old someday and how many women are worried about being old. Because what goes along with being old?
Looks.
What's that?
Looks.
Looks, wrinkles, yeah. Stamina, yeah. And so being old is not just a matter of, I mean, there's a double-edged thing there. First off, there's a fear, of course, that when you're old, you're going to be ugly. But there's also a fear that when you're old, that you're going to be less than what you presently are. Like if any of you guys, like one thing you guys will discover in life is that no matter how strong you are, you're never stronger than your dad until you are. And then one day it's going to hit you like, holy crap, I'm stronger than my dad. And that's going to kind of, if you have an illusion in your head that your dad is this, towering, strong superhero figure, everything falls apart at that point. And the realization that seeps in at that point is he's going to die. And if death can even kill your dad, then my goodness, that means it can kill you too. One of those great reminders about your mortality is, especially as you get older, is the people around you who die. Like when I was growing up, most of my friends from when I was a kid, they're either dead or they're in jail or they're in rehab. And yet I went to a lot of funerals when I was in high school from people I knew who died. And it was almost like it wasn't like a wake-up call that you're going to die. It was almost like a confirmation that you can't die because everybody else is dying, but not me. Somehow I'm not dead. And it isn't until something happens that helps you to see your own mortality that then suddenly you kind of realize, this can happen. Now, ideally, maybe it can motivate us to say, I'm going to start living. I'm going to start doing things right, but not usually. Usually there's usually terror sets in for most people at that point. It does motivate some people. Some people it's just terror sets in. But she's thinking that she's going to be old and dead and then forgotten. And as I pointed out earlier, outside of academic circles, not many people know who she is. She's very famous. She's very well known within academic circles. But she wasn't, today if I ask you who are some of your favorite academics, I would bet that most of us in this room could not name our favorite academics. And it wasn't always this way. Going back 20, 30, 40 years or so, 50 years, people would have known who she was. Even though she was a philosopher and an author, she would have been famous. She would have been on talk shows, she would have been on the news, people would have known who she was. And today, we don't celebrate academics the way that we used to. We have whole new media. We celebrate influencers, we celebrate pop stars the way that we didn't used to. We celebrate athletes the way that we didn't used to. And so all of that space that used to be given to people like her is now taken up by entertainers, which I'll leave it to you to figure out if that's a good thing or a bad thing, the fact that our attention is taken up by entertainers rather than academics. I'll let you figure out if you think that's a great thing or not. But in her case here, she's realizing something, as Nathan was saying, that she's going to die. Is that a terrible thing? Well, I suppose for the second that it's happening. But what happens afterwards, who knows? But it is a biological fact about everybody. And yet she can kind of recognize that this life itself is temporary, no matter how long it goes on. She lived quite a while. She didn't die at 20 years old. She lived an okay amount of time. Yeah. But 78 years old. And there are people I talk to, they'll say, oh man, I wouldn't want to live past 50. Because, why not? Because then you start dying. Like, crap, at 50? Jeez.
People don't die at 50.
What's that?
People don't die at 50.
I mean, but when you're like 15, you think, oh yeah, people die, 50 is old. I don't even know what old is. I remember thinking when I was younger, what's a 43-year-old person sound like? Oh, I'm gonna die soon. Oh, everything hurts, just kill me. Now I realize, you know what a 43-year-old person sounds like?
You're ambiguous.
Good afternoon, guys. How you guys doing today?
Yeah, you're ambiguous.
For today. What's that?
You're ambiguously 43. You don't know how old you are all the birthdays.
That's true. If you count all my birthdays together, I've got to be past 100 by now. 120.
You're not even.
I have 4 birthdays a year. So yeah, if you multiply that out, but that's only been for the past few years. What's that?
It could be more.
Could be. Could also be less. It's ambiguous. But we get a changing sense of what old is. For her, however old you think it is, if you get there, you're going to get there. Hopefully. This is why when I hear people like make fun of old people, I'm like, my gosh, why? They've lived way longer than you have. It'd be great if you got to that age someday. Wouldn't it be great if you got to the age where you're supposed to complain about everything and yet not actually complain about everything? Wouldn't it be great if you got to an age when you're supposed to complain about how great things used to be, but you don't complain about how great things used to be? In other words, if you can somehow die young, as old as possible. Maybe that's the goal in life. To die young, as old as possible. In other words, to maintain that wonder that maybe you had when you were a little kid. When you were that 5-year-old or 6-year-old or 3-year-old, whatever it was, going to the beach for the first time. And you get to encounter all the exhilaration and terror of going to the beach the first time. Or however old you were when you went on a plane for the first time and you felt that almost weightlessness as you lift off the ground, you realize, holy crap, I really am flying. And if you've had that experience for the first time already. Or any of these things that you can experience, if you can remember the exhilaration of what it was like to do any of these things for the first time. And hopefully continue to experience things in new ways, realizing that the problem in life is not that there's nothing to do. The problem in life is that there's so much to do. And there are so many things to do for the first time. And there's not enough time to do them because there's also a whole bunch of other things that you probably really want to do for the 1,000th time as well. And so how do you balance those things out? Which is why, at least for myself, how best to spend the time just inevitably becomes the question. And it strikes me as a thing that's just so unspeakably sad in a life that's as short as ours. How do you make the most of every single moment? Because you've only got so many. No matter, even if you live to be 1,000 years old, you still only have so many moments. It's still not enough because there's so much to do. And yet she's dreading this thing about, I'm going to be dead and forgotten. And going back to what a few of you guys talked about with regards to time. Now look at this second case here. There's a dude sitting in a dingy hotel room, lamenting his circumstances. And when we're in those bad times, we tend to think it's always going to be like this. Remember, he's in a dingy hotel room, and that's important to this. He didn't get to a dingy hotel room because he made a whole bunch of great decisions in life. He didn't get there because he has a great golf game. He got there because life's kicked him in the teeth, and he's probably contributed to that. I mean, think about a hotel room, if you're living in a hotel room, unless you're living in the penthouse, unless you're living in the suite, living in a hotel room just sucks. And I know, by the way, that some of my students have had to do this, so I know I'm speaking to some people when I say this. Because the cost of living in a hotel, the reason that you live in a hotel is because you've lost your apartment, you've lost your house. And there's this weird paradox where you lost those things because you couldn't afford them. So you have to live in a hotel room, which costs you probably way more a month than the mortgage would have, or more than the rent would have. You get a hotel room for like $100 a night, I don't know, do the math on that, it's $3,000 a month. That's more than most rents. That's more than most mortgages. So there's an irony there where you're too poor to afford your house, but you're also too poor to afford this, but somehow but now you have to pay for this hotel room that you can't afford. That sucks. That puts you in a really bad place because you also recognize that being able to stay there is only temporary. You can't stay there forever. It's not, and even if you can afford to, you recognize it's not your own place. whatever you put into that hotel room in terms of the nightly rent, whatever, nightly rates, you're losing. You're never going to get that back. It's just gone. It goes to the hotel. It's just gone money. And yet, despite all of these woes, we'll dwell on that and just think, man, I will always be here. She's recognizing that the transitoriness of her own life that's going to pass. And then when we're in the depths of despair, darkness, we tend to think this is going to go on forever. Does it? No. One thing that you can absolutely bet about life is that it changes. It changes. Is it going to change for the better, or is it going to change for the worse? The answer, of course, is yes. Yes. Whatever you do, if you're going through a difficult time, please don't ask the universe, can this get any worse? Because one thing that you're going to discover is that yes. The answer to that question is always yes. No matter what you're going through, it can always get worse. But also, despite what you're going through, can it also get better? Of course. Of course, but you have to be around for it to get better. If you want to see the world change, all you have to do is wait. If you want to see the world change, all you have to do is get older, and you're going to see the world change in dramatic ways. Now, is it change for the better? Is it change for the worse? Well, that largely depends on your outlook. Because whether you live in heaven on earth or whether you live in hell on earth is largely due to your perspectives. It's largely due to how you conduct yourself. If you want to live in a heaven on earth, then you have to see those good times happen. You have to wait for them to occur. But if you dwell on your negative circumstances constantly, then you are living in hell, and you put yourself there. Even if you didn't put yourself there by your circumstances, you company laid a bunch of people off. You lost your house. Now you're living in this hotel room, and you're wondering if things can get any better. Things can get any worse. You didn't put yourself in hell that way, but whether you're sitting there thinking it is always going to be like this, and you dwell on that, you're putting yourself in hell mentally that way. So how you conduct yourself will largely have to do with whether you're living in heaven on earth or hell on earth. But just notice this. I wonder how often you've gone through terrible times and you've just thought, man, things are always going to be like this. It's never going to get any better. I wonder how often you've gone through some really good times and you've been like, it's always going to be like this. It's never going to get any worse. We tend to do that first one, not the second one. But it's equally true about both. You're going to go through the highs, and you're going to go through the lows. And which one makes you fully human is both. You've got to go through both. And you can find meaning and purpose in both. And you can find something in the bad times that make the good times better. And you can find things in the good times that remind you during the bad times that the good times are always around the corner. You can lament and wish that the good times would last a little bit longer. That's normal for people to do. But also, don't rush yourself necessarily through the bad times, because they can make the good times that much better. But you got to be around to see it. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy Wednesday.
Yay.